Oh, well, good morning. It's oddly really cold. I thought we were supposed to be in summertime. Did I miss a memo somewhere? Anyways, while I was on vacation, which I am now back from, hi, I'm back. I did get to do some reading. I did read two books. The first one was kind of garbage, so we're not talking about that one. But the second one is I read the newly translated Battle Royale. It's been translated before, but the new version that dropped has a newer translation that some have said are a bit easier to read through and in some respects a little better for newer readers of the book. So I read that one. I believe the translator was Nathan Collins, but I'll put a picture on screen so you can see it. When I got home, I then decided, let's go down nostalgia road. This IP I originally consumed as the movie version, and I didn't really remember it very well, so I decided let's sit down and watch the movie. Here are my thoughts on where it differs from book to movie. Let's go. So in the book, you still have, the class getting shipped off and suddenly finding themselves in a life or death situation. That is kind of the same between the book and the movie. In that regard, it's essentially the same. However, the setting is critically very different. In the movie, even after rewatching it a couple times and finally switching off the English dubbed version, which is the only one that Amazon Prime would show me, the actual setting isn't super clear. It appears to be Japan, but in terms of why the students are being sent on this battle royale deathmatch, it's not super clear. I think from rewatching it a few other times just to try to figure out what the actual setting was, it seemed like adults were getting really irritated with problem children and then sending them out to kill each other to reduce the number of problem children. I don't know if I got that right, but I did rewatch it a couple times to try to figure out what the actual plot was. In the book, it's not exactly that. In the book, it's not exactly per se Japan. It's a more fictionalized fascist version, and this big death battle that happens every year is more because the government is corrupt and they basically use it as a TV sport to bet on. It's more fucked up in the book. Just quick warning, spoilers for the larger plot starting about now. If you haven't read the book or watched the movie and you don't want to get spoiled, go watch something else. Shoot, get out of here. Anyways, in the book, you still start with the protagonist, Shuya, his friend Noriko. I'm butchering a lot of names here, I apologize. And, you start to meet the class and you get a lot of backstory on what each of their, actual personalities is like. You don't really get this in the movie, and I can't really ding them for it because it's a movie where paragraphs of, backstory can be explained. In the book, it's a little harder to do it in the movie. Flashbacks help a little bit, but they're not exactly the same as the book. Now, my biggest gripe with the movie, even though I still enjoy watching it to this day, is they did Kiriyama so wrong. Now, I haven't read the manga, and I haven't read the specific manga that focuses in on one of the other parts of the story yet. I want to, though. But in the book, you kind of slowly are introduced to the idea that Kiriyama is not quite right in the head. It starts to trickle in, you're like, this is a little strange. And it gets more and more sinister the more you see him appear during the Battle Royale and the more flashbacks you see with his friends that he apparently has no problem killing off and shows no remorse and apparently doesn't feel any emotion at all. In the movie, they just make him an evil, mean transfer student. It's dumb. I get it. It is, however, very dumb. In the book, we also get to see kind of the relationship between Shuya and one of the first kids to die. They're besties. His best friend is in love with this chick that he has to protect now, but the reason that he dies is very, very different book to movie. In the movie, it's just because, the teacher just freaking hates him. Oh, did I mention that the main teacher changes book to movie? Because that's a weird one. The actual divergent point, book to movie, is the big mean teacher has very different motivations, appears to have a completely different role, and it's just a really strange choice. I mean, I don't know if the author of the book had any say on the movie. I mean, I assume he did. But that switching of who it was, I was kind of bummed by, because I was really excited to see the book villain show up, but it's fine. He served his purpose just fine. He did come off a little comically evil as opposed to the book teacher, who was actually chilling and terrifying. But it happens. In the book, the first kid to die dies because the evil teacher forced himself on the head of the orphanage that kid was from, and it made him snap, and they shot him to death. So, in the movie, the teacher just says, fuck you, and bonks the button and blows up his collar, blowing his head off. So, in my mind, the book's reason kind of makes more sense. The movie's reasons just feels a little goofy. In the book, the actual explanation of the rules is kind of done by the actual staff, and it's not funny or goofy, it's just very straight-laced. In the movie, it's a very funny instructional video with this super cute chick being like, okay, grab your guns and go, and I kind of like that. It's dumb. That was fun. I enjoyed that part. In terms of other book and movie differences, there were a couple characters I kind of felt very upset that weren't given more in the movie. There's one character who is obsessed with idol culture and has a little locket with her favorite idol in it, and you just watch her mentally snap and start having a conversation with the idol in her locket, and it is wild. I mean, she dies, but it's wild, and it's really fun to watch her just mentally lose it. There's also another character who apparently thinks she's a magical girl of some variety and has a voice in her head, egging her on, being like, yes, you're the savior. And she just kind of immediately dies in one shot because she tries to go after Kiriyama, who is pretty well established as the most deadly person on the island. So that was entertaining. In terms of super accurate scenes, a lot of the deaths are super duper accurate. There's a couple that don't really make any sense, but most of them are pretty true to the book. In terms of weapons, though, I guess I understand why the movie went for more comedic weapon choices. I mean, in the book, nobody gets a paper fan or a pot lid, but there are some definitely very silly ones. Someone, I think, gets a fork. It's dumb. But in the movie, they just kind of make it more so. They do get the first weapon correct, though, which is good, and they do get the first official in-game death correct, so happy to see that. In the book, however, there is this huge byline of why these students are angry and what this government has done, and corruption, and being complacent with a government that commits horrible acts and is very invasive and is definitely breaking the law. There's a lot of instances in flashbacks of the government's police just killing indiscriminately because someone spoke out against the government. It's very deep. In the movies, we don't really get any of that. It's more we send kids to go kill each other than, crown winner and have kind of culled the herd of bad kids. I feel like that was a big miss on the point of the movie. It would have been really interesting to see the Peach government, as it's called in the book, be the government used, because it's much more sinister, evil, corrupt, and when you actually see the members of that government interacting in some of the scenes, you're like, wow, these guys are just sick. They're just sick. There's no real rhyme or reason to what they're doing other than they need something to pass the time, and this battle royale gives them a chance to bet money and be degenerate. I don't know. In terms of what the movie did get right, it was nice to finally see some of these scenes that you read about with insane detail. It does not hold back on the gore, I'll tell you that right now. It does not hold back, and I kind of love it for that. It does kind of lose some of the oomph that the book brought with all of the backstory and the setting and the world building, but I still think it holds up. It's just not the same story per se. One of the things I did do, because I was curious, is I then went to the second Battle Royale movie, which, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not based on any of the manga or books. If I'm wrong, please tell me in the comments, because I haven't read the manga yet, so I can't double check it yet. I wanted to love it. It starts with the same formula. Naughty kids on a school trip get picked up, sent to military facility, are expected to complete in a big death game. Same thing. We get it. We've been here before. We got it. However, where the second movie really loses me is the choice of the teacher for this group. is their actual teacher, who did not have an issue with them being sent on a death battle, unlike their first teacher in the first book, who gets murdered because he opposes it. This teacher is all in, does not care, kinda comes off like a JoJo's villain, if I'm being honest, just very overacted, I think is the word I'm looking for, just very extra. I'll put a picture of him on screen somewhere. It's okay. It's not bad, it's just not what I was expecting for like a gritty movie on kids that have to kill each other. Well, but hang on, in this version of the movie, they aren't really expected to kill each other, they are expected to go after the surviving victors of the last death battle. You remember from the first book, Shuya, who has barricaded himself on an island. And this is where it just gets very sequely strange. So, they have the collars, that's the same. They don't have random weapons this time. They have government issue because they're all being fitted like army people. I don't know, I don't do military things. But they're all being fitted like army people to go storm the island and kill Shuya. And where it starts to get very comical and strange, and not in a good way in my opinion, is when one of their very truant classmates decides, I'm not going to do this, screw you. So he gets killed. But then we start to hear collar beeping. And that's when we realize, to add a little bit of spice to this year's game, they've paired collars. So if your partner dies, your collar explodes and you die. And there's nothing you can do about it. So we watched one of the more rough, I'll say, characters who had no problem jumping the line, being like, hell yeah, let's do it. Her collar starts beeping and she dies. So we kind of get the setup, right? So it's different from last time. They're in pairs. They're doing what the army is too lazy to go do, to go handle Shuya, who apparently now is a terrorist. In the book, his motivations were, I'm gonna fuck with this country and take down the government. But in the movie, it feels like it got a little lost, because instead of him doing this for the character who saves him in the first movie and then promptly dies, it kind of seems like maybe it's the translations under the words he's saying, but it just feels very kids forever, fuck the adults. And while I understand that is based in a long history of protesting in students in Japan, the way they wrote it just feels very childish. I don't know how to say it. I don't think those were the author's original words that he would have given to this character. Does that make sense? It doesn't feel like the character I read about, and it doesn't feel like the character I saw in the first movie, whose real only motivation was to get his female friend to safety because she was the crush of his best friend. It doesn't feel like that's the same character speaking. It is the same actor that they used, which is wild, but they kind of give him this very strange writing. It doesn't really make sense. So, they do the same, send him to the island shit, but the thing where I start to have an issue with this, right? In the first book and movie, there's a lot of very interesting approaches to surviving the island, not fighting, trying to get people on your team, killing everything, aka Kiriyama's approach, using guns, using crossbows, using traps, using poison. It was interesting to see how some of these students thought. And in this movie, they just storm the beaches, and it feels like a World War II film for no reason. And we see a lot of kids die, immediately, which is not a good sign, because in the original book, it had a flow to it, and in the original movie, it had a flow to it, because you weren't killing off 20 kids at once. But that's what this movie does. It kills off 20 kids at once, and you're just so where are you gonna go from here? We are also introduced to this very tough as nails female character, who apparently is the daughter of the teacher from the first film, not the first book, to be clear, but it's the first film. And she's really pissed, and she wants to figure out why this was something her dad would do. Who knows? She's basically presented as a very intense, straight-laced chick that is ready to kick ass and shoot everything, and does not particularly care about her classmates at all. So, they storm it, and then we kind of have some interludes of them having gunplay exchanges with Shuya's team, and it becomes very immediately clear at one point in the film that Shuya's team has no idea that these are kids. They've been outfitted in military gear, so they probably just think it's soldiers storming. So of course they go hog wild with their bullets. Once they realize it though, they're like, oh shit, they're victims just like us. But of course they've already mowed down 30 of them, so whoops. kids. And I think this is where the movie starts to lose me. They try to like delve into Shuya's big vision at some point in this film, and it's just kids rule, parents drool, and it's like, oh my god. It just wasn't written very well compared to the first movie, which was serviceable. Not great, but serviceable. The second movie just feels kind of rushed. The main villain guy is goofy as balls and has really weird habits, and we don't really understand why he has a collar on initially, but okay, I guess. Also, why does he have a collar on? In the first movie, the teacher doesn't have a collar. Why does this teacher have a collar on? What happened? Why is he wearing one? I don't understand. This wasn't very clearly explained at any point in the movie, so I don't get what's going on. And I will say he does have like a deliciously stupid death in this. It's not like the first book where, you know, Shuya and Noriko gun him down because, you know, fuck this guy. He has the most awkward hero's journey I don't get it. Like, he comes out in a rugby uniform and is just like cheering them on and going 3, 2, 1, go before his neck collar explodes and he dies while doing a rugby touchdown thing. I don't know. It's weird. It's so weird. But you get it. Like, it was very goofy. And then, you know, the end of the movie happens happily ever after. Noriko's apparently not dead, even though we were led to think she was dead this whole time. That's how I read it. And they are all in some war-torn country living their best life. I don't get it. It makes no sense. In the book, Noriko and Shuya escape to the United States, or we are at least led to believe they try to escape to the United States. That's their plan, and they plan to eventually come back and fuck with the government that is just indiscriminately killing people, have shitty values, and are just sending kids to die for sport at this point. We can kind of see that it's not a research project, it's sport. And the first movie, like, it didn't bother me that much that they didn't exactly follow the book, but the second movie, I won't deny that it was fun to watch, but it just jumps the shark on what the whole premise was. I mean, maybe this is in the manga. Maybe I haven't read this yet. Tell me in the comments, is this batshit story in the manga, the Requiem story? Is it, like, does the teacher come off like a goofy anime villain? I know with the manga you have a little more license because it's drawn, so it's not as in your face when it's that goofy. But the one thing that, like, struck me that is just weird is I think they tried to make an allusion to him being on a lot of drugs, which was why he was very, like, extra. But it just kind of looks like birth control packets. Yeah, hang on. Okay, so for those who are uninitiated, this is what a birth control packet looks like. In the movie, it shows him chowing down on something like this. So, director of the second movie, can you explain to me why, like, your way of making villain bad was to have him chow down on birth control? I think, or are those supposed to be drugs? Because I'm so confused. Yeah, so confused. But anyway, in terms of my final thoughts on the book I read and the 2 movies I watched, what are my thoughts? So, my thoughts are you should read the book. You should read the new translation. It's really, really good. It's actually a very fast read. The book is about, like, this thick, but it'll only take you maybe a couple of days if you're a fast reader and maybe a week if you're a slow reader. It paces very, very fast, and there's a lot of political intrigue. The characters are sometimes a little over-introduced, but I would prefer that to what the movie does, honestly. There's a lot of really interesting discourse and, you know, thought-provoking things on, like, if you were in this scenario, what would you do? And a lot of the students take different approaches, so you can kind of, like, see some interesting thought processes going around. There's a lot of gore. I find gore easier to read than see, so that might help you too. And it's just a more in-depth variation of the story. It's the original. Obviously, it's gonna be more in-depth. And I feel like it's more in line with what the author had intended as the vision of the story, because it's the book, and I don't know how closely he was able to monitor the people making the movie, but the first one, it feels like he had sub-control. The second one just kind of felt like it flew out of his hands. The first movie is not bad. First movie's okay. I would definitely recommend that to a friend as, like, a fun, cheesy watch. The second movie, it's a cheese fest. If you like cheesy battle royale movies, like really bad ones, it might be good for you. If you want to preserve kind of the feelings you had after watching the first battle royale, honestly, I would skip it. Unlike, the Catching Mockingjay, Catching Fire series, it doesn't, like, keep up the same momentum as some of the books do. I don't know if there's a second battle royale book. I'm gonna go look and see if there is. To my knowledge, there is not. There's just the manga. But unlike the movies in that series, it doesn't kind of keep the same momentum movie to movie. It just goes from, like, very serious to cheese fest. So if you liked the very serious approach of the first movie, even though it wasn't like done exactly in accordance with the book, I would just stick with that one and rewatch it again. If you're not a big fan of cheese, if you love a good cheese fest, watch Battle Royale 2 Requiem. It's not bad. But yeah, that's been my thoughts. If you want to hear me talk about more books and movies that I've read or watched, let me know in the comments. I still have a couple more books from my beach vacation that I haven't started yet, and I would love to hear your feedback. Anywho, bye!